I just realized that mental illness knows no boundaries.
Zero.
It's not an African-American problem. It's not based on your socioeconomic level. It is impacting everyone globally. The young people are experiencing cyberbullying to such a great extent that recently I started doing some research around the suicide rates.
Sure.
And the number 2 cause of death among kids between 10 and 18 is suicide.
Welcome to Catch the Moment podcast. I am your host, David Tyree.
It is caught by Tyree. That's a great catch by David Tyree. Oh my God. This ball's thrown and Tyree just goes up for it like a basketball player.
Welcome back to Catch the Moment podcast. It's your host, David Tyree. Man, I have a very, very exciting, impactful episode lined up for you. You already know this is where you come to get insight, direction, clarity on your journey, right? The pain points, the process, what's going on underground to get you to your next moment. Today, I have a good friend reconnecting, but we're gonna go all the way there. Medina Jett, how are you?
I am great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Listen, super thrilled. The first question we always lead with, in light of myself kind of being known for a moment, where were you the first time you ever saw the helmet catch? What was your thoughts? Any memories? If there's an intriguing story, go for it.
Okay, so I am not like a big football fan.
Even better, my favorite kind of people.
I typically only watch the Super Bowl.
Okay, well, so we got you.
And so I remember the big helmet catch, but then I didn't know you, so it was just a moment in time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I saw you on LinkedIn and you were talking about your new role with the Giants, and I was in the mode then of trying to find athletes who I know tend to struggle with wealth management.
Sure.
And so I connected to you, and then I said, oh my God, that's the helmet catcher.
You had an aha moment.
And so, I had the aha moment and, put two and two together, but I don't even remember where I was when I originally saw it because it wasn't that
It wasn't your vibe. You was just enjoying the Super Bowl party.
Super Bowl.
Listen, that's good. That works for you. But we have so many other synergies. When you talk about you have a tremendous journey of just, I would even say impact. It's very clear that as a lawyer, as an executive, and again, we did connect on the area of impacting athletes, minority communities. There's a lot of threads where we easily align. But I have to I want to lay the pathway because I think at this stage, where I want to start is, there's a lot of legacy building for you, in light of what would you say even up to this journey? Because when I look at going to law school, having success in the marketplace, getting into, components of real estate. These are all buzzwords and things that everyone has access to now. What, at this stage of your journey, has been your defining moment?
My defining moment, I think my defining moment is motherhood.
And tell me why, because we know about these motherhood stripes.
And so becoming a mom almost 30 years ago, my oldest daughter turns 30 this year.
Wow. Aging gracefully.
Thank you. But becoming a mother really impressed upon me the need to think about the future. And not just living for today, but creating a legacy for the future generations. And I think so much about how the Black community tends to live for today. And I hear my friends and so many people, well, you can't take it with you. And so they spend. And I'm like, you can't take it with you, but you can leave it to the next generations.
Come on.
And the Black community, we're so rarely left with an inheritance. We're typically left with bills and forced to do a GoFundMe when our loved ones die. And I'm like, how about we start to change that narrative and actually create wealth for our grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren, and descendants that we'll never, ever meet.
Oh, gosh.
And so that's really been the focus of what I do and what I'm trying to do in the Black community.
Wow. All right, so you hit on a lot of passions. People ask me, well, what was your drive for the NFL? It didn't start until I actually had a child in college at 21 years old. And when you don't have a plan for having a child, which is shocking then you're like, well, how am I going to take care of this child? And just the practical thing where I was in college was I wasn't immensely successful, but I'm like, I want to do his best. I want to do his best for this little young tiger that I'm going to bring into the world. And for me, in light of what my passions were, I had to dream a new dream. And I was fortunate to be able to realize, which most people aren't. But for you, how did, even when you talk about, I'm just into other people's journey. So when you talk about being a lawyer, you have to pay the price. So that's one of these few professions where you talk about the extra work equity, lawyers, doctors, educational. Where did the pedigree come from? What was life like growing up, and how did you get that on the radar?
Yeah, no, so that's a very good question. I grew up, and I like to say dirt poor. But I'm like, okay, I need another word to describe it.
And I know about the heartbeat a little bit.
We were very, very humble in terms of our upbringing.
Sure.
Working class poor. My parents divorced when I was 9, and then we were like poor.
Gotcha.
And fortunately, I grew up in a household where my parents were Muslims. And because of that, it was very strict. So we didn't go out much.
Yeah.
There was no dating. And so it was all just focused on schoolwork.
Gotcha.
And when I got to 6th grade, my 6th grade teacher told my mom about a private school that she thought my sister and I should go to because we were just so far above the kids in our class.
Sure.
And so we ended up going to Hopkins, which really changed the trajectory of my life.
Wow.
And I was the only Black person in my class for years. But growing up in two very different worlds where I would catch the school bus up the hill to this beautiful, picturesque campus with all white kids who were living the life and not even realizing it.
Oh, man.
And then I'd take the bus back down the hill to my neighborhood and my friends, and I was like, y'all don't know what's out there.
What's going on in the world.
And I realized that lack of exposure is what keeps a lot of people back. But because I was exposed to it, I became friends with my classmates. I'd spend weekends spending the night at their homes.
Nice.
And I started talking to their parents, like, what do you do for work? And how did you get there? Like,
so you
what was your path? Because I knew I was not meant to be poor. And I'm like, this is a temporary situation.
I'm not meant to be broke.
We're going to fix it. Right? And so that was my whole driving force. Like, I may be in this situation now, but my kids will never have to live like this. And so that's what drove me to go to law school. I eventually went to business school, so I have an MBA as well. And just really trying to change not only my family's position, but the Black community altogether.
We kindred spirits, right? So I grew up in a divorce home. So just to kind of connect the dots. And it was a similar thing. We talk about exposure. And really when you look at the opportunities that are available for individuals and even minorities, which are limited, is that there's a lack of vision, right? And just being removed or moved into a different environment creates possibility. And so just kind of in that similar theme, when you think about law school and the extra 4 years or like 3 years. Okay. So, it's usually 3 to 4 years. Like from who were the people, right? So when you talk about long-term success or high-end success, and success is very relative, which is a big theme, even in this conversation. How did you navigate it? Because most people, they can't give you, I think, especially as minorities, our parents typically couldn't give us what they didn't have themselves, right? So who were the people along the way that were guiding forces, that team to help you?
The very first role model that I had was Ella Grasso. She was the first woman governor of the state of Connecticut. And she came to talk to us at my school. And she was a lawyer.
What age, how old are you at this stage?
I was 7th or 8th grade.
Got you. Wow.
And she was so impressive, and she was leading the entire state. And she was this big, buxom woman. But she talked about how she had gone to law school and then got into politics. And I went up to talk to her after her talk.
Wow.
And I said, I want to be the first Black governor of the state of Connecticut. She was like, that is awesome. I went to law school. Law school opened so many doors of what you can do with that law degree. And so my original thought in going to law school was to be the first Black governor of the state of Connecticut. And, jury's still out. It's not too late. We haven't had one yet. But I moved to Atlanta, so I don't know. But then once I was in college.
Sure.
And my third cousin is Constance Baker Motley. The Honorable Constance Baker Motley, may she rest in peace.
Okay,
but
excellent.
she was Manhattan borough president.
Okay.
She was nominated by President Lyndon Johnson as the first Black female to sit on the federal court.
Amazing.
In 1966.
You're educating me.
And she became my role model at that point as I got older. And my family started to say, you're related to Constance Baker Motley. I didn't know that I came from that.
Some pedigree in the family.
Yeah, so that really got me charged up about, I'm definitely going to law school now.
Yeah.
But I didn't know her.
Got you.
And so when I got to Wesleyan, I was talking to other students who also wanted to go to law school, but none of us knew the path to take. We heard about this LSAT test, but we didn't really know how to prepare, what it was, when it was. And so I started a minority law society at Wesleyan. And I got all the other minority students who wanted to go to law school. And back then, it's going to age me, but back then, there was no internet or anything. And so I got the Yellow Pages.
I can't believe it.
This huge book. I got the Yellow Pages and I flipped through to find attorneys and I just started calling them. And I said, I have a group of Black students who want to go to law school. We don't have mentors. We don't know what the path is. Can you come talk to us? And so I had lawyers coming to Wesleyan to talk to us about the process for what courses to take to study for the LSAT. When do you take it?
Wow.
What's the best time to start applying to law schools? And then one of the lawyers that came to talk to us ended up giving me an internship. He actually wrote my letter of recommendation for Georgetown Law School.
Okay, this is so exciting because I'm like you were poised for leadership. I mean, like at this stage, you're talking about like. We typically hear a lot more, especially in our current generation, not because they're not amazing, just because it's convenience creates, comfort creates convenience, right? So it's like the initiative, right? The initiative you gathered, you saw a need, you feel that this is like real this is what makes entrepreneurs great, being able to see an opportunity, filling a gap. Yeah. So as I'm listening to you, I'm like, wow. No surprise here. The jet is taking off of the runway. It's literally. I like that. So I'm just amazed at that age or stage in your journey that there's the awareness to understand what the needs are and take the initiative. And I think this is what to no surprise. When you talk about law, and I know I've learned that there's a lot of misconceptions about lawyers and wages and things of that nature. As you kind of make your way into fulfilling a dream, crushing a goal, what was your experience like? What were the highs and lows of working in that, in this arena versus what the dream was as a kid to now this is your living reality and the sweat equity involved? So
when I was applying to law school, LA Law was the big show on TV.
Yes!
Blair Underwood.
Did you have a crush on him?
So I think I had a little bit of a crush, but I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be in the courtroom, trying cases.
Yeah.
And the very first law firm, I did a summer internship with them, and then they gave me an offer to come back after law school. And I said, great, I want to do litigation. And they said, no, we think you should do corporate. And I was like, corporate? I want to do corporate. I want to be in the courtroom. And they kept talking to me, and they said, and I'll never forget, this older white-haired partner said to me, you need to learn how the world economy works.
Oh.
And I was like, okay.
This is powerful.
And the point he was making is that as a Black attorney, I know you probably don't know much about that.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to do what they see. And I didn't see finance. I didn't see asset management. I didn't know how companies sold stock and what impacted the stock price. All of that stuff, I had no exposure to it. So when he said, you need to be in the corporate law department. And I finally said, okay, like I will do that.
Did you see that as a, because I think people can, you immediately found reason and understanding where you saw the opportunity. But some people can see that as a slighting opportunity too. Like you don't know what you don't know. Or so how is that working out? And we know that us in the African-American community, we have our challenges, right?
So I went through that phase. I stayed at that firm for 2 years and I was bored out of my mind. In the law library. And they actually were really good because they encouraged me to start playing golf. He said, go out, get a set of golf clubs, take some lessons, and then come back. And so I was like, I'm ready. They started inviting me out to play golf with different clients. And,
Sure.
and it really just, again, exposure to how deals get done. And we got a lot of deals done on the golf course.
Yes.
And I was just naturally athletic.
So it's not a myth.
So it's not a myth
that deals,
at all.
okay.
But I did feel this need to be around younger people
Sure.
and people of color, because I was in a firm with all older white men.
Absolutely.
So after 2 years, the litigation bug was still there.
Sure.
And so I hopped over to another firm, and they had promised me a position in the law department.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
I finally got to do trial work and all of those things I wanted to do. And so fast forward a couple of years of being a trial attorney,
Sure.
I ended up in the Aetna Law Department. And I was seeing how all the white guys were doing corporate and finance. And all of the women and minorities were doing litigation and employment law. And I was like, wait a minute. And then I thought back to what the partner said to me, and I realized that it's probably no people of color in that department.
Sure.
Because we gravitate to what we know.
Yeah.
And so that's when I start raising my hand. I want to be on that deal. I want to do that. And it was all related to corporate and M&A. And they started
Mergers and acquisitions.
giving me opportunities to work on projects. Sure. And while I was in the law department, we acquired Prudential's healthcare business. And I said, I want to be on the deal team. And they said, well, you don't really do a lot of M&A. You're in the litigation department, but we do need somebody to do real estate.
Sure.
And I said, I can do that. And they're like, real estate. I had clerked for one summer at a real estate firm,
I love it.
my first year out of law school.
I can do it.
I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I ended up so far in over my head. I was responsible for every single lease and service throughout like 300 Prudential healthcare facilities. I had to assign all of those leases and negotiate with landlords and get all of the shared services negotiated and reassigned. And I hired outside counsel, and I worked day and night because this was in addition to my regular job.
Ooh.
And so many times I said, what have I gotten myself into? But I pulled it off, and at the end of the day, saved the company like millions in being able to renegotiate leases for lesser amounts. And after that, people are like, okay, you give Medina an assignment, she's going to kill it. And that's how my career started to take off.
That is amazing.
And before you know it, I was running the claim operation for Aetna. I got a role to become chief compliance officer at Cigna Investments, and then Prudential, and then the Hartford. And before I was 40, I had been a senior executive at 3 Fortune 500 companies.
Woo! Come on, somebody. Okay. All right. So, and like I said, it's hard to close up. So much of your journey is filled with rich learning opportunities where I tell people it takes humility to be a lifelong learner, right? And I think those are some of the biggest missed opportunities, not in minority, everywhere, a fixed mindset. So when you think about what it takes, that trajectory, what are a couple of those qualities that you realized that you had learned, accrued, that would cause somebody in line, circling the pathway to success? What are a few qualities that you really feel like they should be equipped with?
Yeah, I would say number one is a thirst for learning something new.
Great.
And I would always, when I would sit in our law department staff meetings, I hear something, I'm like, I don't know anything about that. Can I be a part of that?
Yeah.
And I just always did that. So I have done some tax, I've done some real estate, some litigation, like a lot of different areas of the law, which you really need to know in order to be able to advise your clients. You may know a little bit about tax, but you know enough to know there could be a potential tax implication. Let's call in the tax lawyer, the expert. And so knowing a little bit about a lot of different things was very, very helpful in my career. The other thing I would say is having faith in yourself.
Come on, sis.
To know that whatever I don't know, I can find it out.
Excellent.
And whatever your expectation is, I am going to exceed it. And a lot of people don't go into new roles with that mindset. And they're timid and they're afraid and they don't want to speak up because they don't know what they are talking about.
And that makes you less believable. And even with your peers, I said confidence is, And, confidence comes through not just belief, but also preparation. So
Yes.
clearly there's a work ethic component.
Absolutely.
Super dynamic. At the same time, you're a mom.
Yes. I am.
So as you're kind of taking this trajectory, what was valuable as you're laying up and breaking chains for your family, your future, and your legacy? What was valuable for you within the home structure as a mom while you navigate? Because y'all, Black women been doing all things been everything to everybody for a long time, but like from a value perspective, what were the things that you kind of like really didn't get lost in and really wanted to drive home?
It's like, so I really wanted to drive home for my kids' independence.
Okay.
Not to rely on anyone. And so I remember when my kids were little, I had a little Uline mini fridge in the kitchen.
Sure.
And in that fridge, I had juice boxes and applesauce and little squeezed yogurts and all of these snacks so that they didn't have to say, Mommy, can I have a snack?
Okay.
Go help yourself.
You free to go
some
get
juice.
this.
They would go trick-or-treating and the whole basket of candy I would put at a level where they could reach it, and I put it in the pantry.
Sure.
And I would say, candy's not good for you. You need to manage how much you're going to have at one time.
Sure.
And I think giving them at a very young age the responsibility of making good decisions for themselves
Sure.
was something that was really important to me. Because I've seen a lot of kids grow up, they leave for college. Whoa, now they can do anything. They're overeating. They don't have good health. They don't know how to discipline themselves.
Sure.
And so my kids went to Montessori school, which teaches that same type of
similar.
Yeah. And then important for me too was to have them see me working and raising a family. And
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
And seeing how to navigate that. And there were times where I would have to set priorities that wasn't necessarily where they thought my priority should be.
Sure.
I may miss a game or a ballet recital because I'm traveling for work.
I got 7. We can't make everything.
Yeah,
we can't do everything.
Can't. And so we had a live-in nanny when the kids were growing up.
Oh,
and
God bless you.
That helped. But
it does help.
It helped a little, but the kids want to see their mom.
They want mom.
In the stands.
You're a rock star.
And there were times where I would pick them up and I'd be on my phone once we got phones, because I remember that too.
Early 2000s was a movement. It was definitely a movement.
I'd be on my phone constantly, like doing emails at the stoplight. And things I know I shouldn't be doing, and the kids would always, put down your phone. But I'm like, I can't in my work day when it's time to pick y'all up because there's still work going on.
Sure.
And so I was constantly trying to juggle.
It's so real. Did you ever have the guilt? I mean, because...
Oh, absolutely.
Because, so talk to me about that part because, especially when, and I don't know, the timeline of, family, marriage, you can talk to, but even, because that's, when you talk about a working mom, there's the innate desire to provide the best, not just by virtue of working, but also what the child is expecting from their mother, right? Versus a man, some of the traditional roles and themes, even if he's in the home or out of the home, it's expected for him to go hunt and do some things of that nature, right? So how did you really find solace as you were crushing these goals, doing what was best for your family, and deal with some of that inner turmoil?
So I tried to ignore a lot of the inner turmoil.
Okay.
So I don't get too much into the relationship side, but me and my ex were not getting along. That was evident. This was not working. But I didn't think the kids were aware of it. And
they usually are.
They were.
As we kind of...
And so when I finally reached the point where, okay, this is not working, I turned 40 and I said, I got to take a different path.
Sure.
I can't just stay in this situation just for the sake of the kids.
Sure.
And so we sat the kids down and had the conversation. And I remember my oldest daughter, who's now almost 30, she was about 13. And she goes, what took you so long? And I realized that I was teaching them the wrong thing. Don't stay where you're not happy. If you're not happy, pivot to happiness. And in my UConn commencement address on Saturday, that was the whole focus of my talk. about pursuing what makes you happy and enjoying the journey of life instead of just trying to get to the destination.
Sure.
A lot of times people get to the destination and then they get hit by a bus, and it's like, you got to enjoy the journey. And I was teaching them to stay in an unhappy situation. And that wasn't the message I wanted to teach them, especially my daughters.
Sure.
And so we divorced in 2007.
Sure.
And then I realized that life became easier, which seems counterintuitive, right? But because we had 50-50 custody, I was then able, for the days that I didn't have my kids with me, to really, really go hard, travel, get all of that stuff out of the way, so that when I did have them, they had more of me. And I could be available for the basketball game and to be the team mom for football and, all that kind of stuff.
All right, everybody, this is David Tyree, your favorite Super Bowl champion. I want you to know something, public service announcement. If you're looking for some energizing salads, some protein-rich, delicious sandwiches and wraps, and our one-of-a-kind Super Bowls, I need y'all to come through 68 South Street in Morristown, Tyree's Table. Come through, get this love, because there's room for everybody at the table. We want you to understand that this is the intersection of health, culinary creativity. We got it going on, y'all. But even more so, this is the place where communities come together. So see us at Tyree's Table. We'll get great done together. No, amazing. And these are hard things, right? I'm gonna tell you, when it comes to marriage, that's like my heartbeat. And I know that there's the happy component and then there's what should be. So going through all the years, I'm like, man, when you have a commitment, and I think people like yourself, you actually understand it, and you're willing to make the sacrifice, it's about what we value and understanding at the expense of this. Everything that I'm engaged with is a relationship, whether it's food, whether it's work, whether it's a husband, a wife. And hopefully, if I understand where the value is, then I'll make I call them necessary sacrifice. And there are some things where you just lose, right? Like, man, when I say lose, like I've lost many times as an athlete. I've taken some losses in the marketplace, and then that's how you grow. And so, whereas, like, man, I think the truest sense of happiness is knowing that you've given your best. And when you give your best, then we can kind of have the resolve. But now let's like, you have an amazing chapter of this journey as you found this season success. I actually connect with you as we were looking to bring you in to support our athletes. Yes. Well, my role in the past with the New York Football Giants was as a director of player engagement, which is really athlete development, leadership development, comprehensive. I get you from the day that you get in to the day that you're moving out the league. And we talk about some of your experience in financial literacy. We were courting. So it didn't get a chance to happen because somebody at the Giants they missed my greatness. They missed my greatness a few times. So, but we've actually even had a few conversations in the middle of the pandemic. I opened a franchise. I got to tap. We're going to tap back in on some other things, But in the middle of this transition in the last few years, life happens in the most profound way. Talk about this stage of your journey with your son, mental health component, and we're going to, open this reality.
So right at a time where everything in my life seemed to be clicking. My daughter had gone off to college. She had just graduated, had a great job in her field in LA. My middle son was in his junior year at Bowdoin College, top liberal arts school in the country up in Maine. And then my youngest was home with me. And one day I got a call from my son's dean telling me I need to get to campus right away. Like something was wrong.
How old is he at the time?
He was 20 at the time, his junior year. By the time me and my ex-husband get to campus, my son was clearly in the middle of a mental health episode.
Wow.
And it was bad, devastating. Like he seemed disconnected with reality, and his brain seemed to be going 100 miles a minute. And he was spouting out questions and, why does zebras have stripes? Do you know? Like, when a tree falls, do you hear it?
Yeah.
And I was like, what is happening? And so I tried to stay calm, and it was clear, like, he was just not himself.
Yeah.
And it was so heartbreaking. And trying to figure out like what happened, we originally thought, did he take drugs? Like he smokes weed, but that's about it. Like, and so we finally got him to the hospital where they were going to do a psych evaluation and figure out what was going on. He admitted to one of the doctors that he had thought about suicide, which when I heard that was just like,
what's going on?
What is happening?
Yeah.
And so they admitted him to the behavioral health floor, which is otherwise known as the psych ward.
Yep.
And that's where he stayed for over a week while I was trying to figure out what happened, how did this happen, how do I even navigate this space?
Yes.
So I immediately got on the phone and started calling friend at Harvard who knew the head of psych at the Harvard Medical School and another friend who was a principal but happened to know a lot about what Black boys were going through with mental health issues, and
amazing.
Just a lot of people that I was able to tap into to get some grounding and direction to even know what to go back in there and ask the doctor for.
Power relationships, man.
24 to 48 hour hold. I was like, what? Like, I had no idea what these things meant.
Yeah.
Psych eval. I was like, wait, what?
What's going on here? Yeah.
And so, long story short, he gets discharged from the hospital. We get him back home with instruction to get him in outpatient mental health treatment. For him to take his meds, start therapy, like all these things. And it's like my world had instantly changed. And how do I manage my son who needs me now more than ever, but he doesn't know that. And a lot of times he's not even of the stable mind to recognize what's happening and what he needs to help himself.
Oh, goodness.
And so he's constantly refusing to go to the hospital when he'd have another episode. And how do I get him there? And because he's over 18, I ran into this huge issue where the law says if someone is over 18, they can decide whether they get hospitalized or not.
Wow.
Not their mommy, you know? And the law doesn't care if that person is in the middle of a mental health crisis.
Man.
So my son would be spiraling, talking about the government's after us, and the hospital the workers would hear this. They'd know he's in the middle of a crisis. And they would say, would you like to be admitted? No, I don't want to be admitted. I'm sorry, ma'am. There's nothing we can do.
Oh, my goodness.
Because the standard is whether he is a danger to himself or others. And him just being in a spiral of an episode, to them, he's not hurting anybody. But I know where he's supposed to be mentally. And I want him to get back there as quick as possible. And so I just ran into this roadblock time and time again, which was so frustrating. And then as I started to share my story, because I said, this can't just be happening to my son.
No, it's not.
Cannot be just happening to my son. So I started talking about it. And I first sent a long email to my extended family. This is what's going on with Dre. And then I start posting on social media about what was going on with him. And to my shock and surprise, people started commenting on the post about what they were dealing with their own child. Even more people started DMing me privately about what they were dealing with their own child. And I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's the transparency.
It's a mental health crisis.
It is.
But nobody was talking about it, so nobody knew that they weren't alone in this.
Oh, my goodness.
And then once I started talking about it, friends started telling friends, you need to call Medina Jett because she's gone through this. At this point, my son was starting to do much better. And I was able to be a blessing to a lot of families who had no clue how to navigate it. And I start talking to them about the power of advocacy, be that squeaky wheel. Because otherwise, your kid will end up in a situation where most people are out on the street. Hospitals want to get them in and out. And if they don't have anywhere to go, they become homeless in a shelter. Like, you got to be that parent that does not give up. And so I started empowering primarily Black mothers.
The relatability factor.
This is what you got to do.
Because we haven't known and we haven't had resources historically. Right. So this is a powerful time for just African-American families. I'm tracking, and when I think about The majority of us coming out of concentrated inner city communities, many of us from a generational standpoint coming out of broken homes. I'm a reader, and I said my parents were boomers, and I said we could look at all these past generations, and we could look at the hypocrisy of America, but I said we did have a sober value system for a long time, and we kind of broke tradition with our value system, and people can believe what they want to believe, but at least there was stability, right, in the uniformity of many of those traditions and values. So I said, listen, man, people are free. You got to be free to live. You got to live your life in your own journey, but we're actually the product of that broken paradigm of, parents who were boomers, sexual revolution, redlining, inner city communities, civil rights, 60s. And I said that time frame is now we're adults. And we're the first informed, like, okay, we were taught to go to college. Right now, our children are looking at it, college a little different in light of the ROI, right? So when I listen to you talk, it's like now we're like no one told us, but this is what we have to do. So tell us about your book and what the thrust is, because I think right now you're such a powerful voice in so many different ways. You're sound, you're astute, you're intelligent, you're impactful, and really it looks like God is filling your life with so much credibility in so much spaces just through experience as well as wisdom. So talk about the book, what people will gain through some of your turmoil, but also triumph.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things you're talking about is we are the product of this other generation, but one of the things that defines that generation for me is the notion that we don't share our dirty laundry.
There it is.
We don't talk about it. We don't put it out there. And there is this stigma around mental illness that, people have said to me, I have mental illness in my family. I said, everybody does. Say something I don't know. Like, everybody does.
Yes.
But people think it's just them.
Yeah.
Because nobody talked about it. And granddaddy.
Well, crazy was just a big old pile of like, oh man, Uncle Johnny crazy. Right? Like it was just Uncle Johnny's crazy.
Yep.
And it was okay. But
either he stayed crazy or he was so crazy that he got locked up in a mental institute and never heard from or spoken of again.
Or in a room in the attic. So
yes, that part.
That part, right? So
so I realized then that we've got to break that generational curse.
Yes.
Of trying to deal with everything inside the household. Ooh. And you can't get help if people don't know you need help.
There it is.
And so one of the reasons I wrote the book is because I realized I'm having all of these one-off conversations, and it had gotten to the point where I was spending at least an hour a night on a call with a family somewhere in this country talking about their child who is struggling and giving them advice and guidance in terms of what they need to be doing as parents.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, okay, I want to be helpful, but this is a lot.
This is a lot.
And I said, I can reach more people by putting my story in a book.
Sure.
Putting my advice in a book. The book is filled with resources in the back of the book.
Tremendous.
For people to check out podcasts, books, articles.
Excellent.
All of these things that will help them navigate this space.
Sure.
And so now when people reach out to me, I said, have you read my book?
Yeah.
No, I haven't had a chance to read it. Well, start there.
Because I need to breathe.
Start there, and then if you have follow-up, questions or want to have a one-off conversation, I'm happy to talk to you.
Sure.
But start with reading the book, and so in the book, I try to give readers a real, relatable story about what happens, and I realize in telling my story about what happened with Dre, so many people are like, the same thing happened to my son.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if over a multi-year period, primarily our sons, but also our daughters were having a very hard time. And it tended to be from the age they were 17 on up to their mid-20s.
Sure.
It's when most of them start to struggle with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, bipolar, schizophrenia, all of these things. But when nobody was talking about it, nobody knew until it happened to them. And then they thought, oh, it's just me because I haven't heard of anybody else. And I realized so many people in my friend circle were struggling. And so when I wrote the book, it was really to start a national conversation about mental illness.
Excellent.
And when people talk about mental health and, oh, yeah, let's have a mental health fair and we'll have a yoga instructor and we'll have somebody who owns a spa. And I said, no. You're talking about some self-care, feel-good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm talking about mental illness where our kids are losing their minds and they need help, and yoga is not going to do it.
No.
And so it's a very
it
different
could be a small
discussion.
listen, breathe. I said breathing is huge, but it's not. After we breathe, we got to get up and do something too.
Right. And it's like, the saying, prayer without works.
Come on,
I'm like, we have got to do some work.
Yes.
And we got to know what the work is that needs to happen. And so writing the book was my way of igniting people to start feeling comfortable talking about their situation. And if you have everybody talking, then it becomes obvious. We have a national crisis on our hands.
Absolutely.
And we are underfunded. State legislatures are pulling money away from mental health as opposed to putting money where it belongs.
Sure.
And so when those who are struggling finally make it to a hospital, guess what? There's rarely enough beds to house the people who need the beds. And so they end up getting turned away, or they go in for a quick few hours for an assessment, give them some meds, they go out the revolving door to make room for somebody else. And that is the biggest frustration that parents have. Like, I tried to get them into the hospital, they didn't have room. By the time they had room, my son had taken off. And we really need just the country to recognize the crisis that we're in. And of all the money that went to the pandemic, that pandemic caused a spike in mental illness.
Massive spike.
And there hasn't been an appropriate recognition of that or appropriate expenditures to address that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive conversation. I know we won't be able to cover. When I look at so many different factors, it's the time, the generation, it's technology. Technology isolates. And then you hit the pandemic, and it was the perfect storm of instability. And for lack of better terms, when you look at the hardness of a time in which we grew up, I said people were outside. People were outside, falling on the ground, engaging. I said,
playing kickball.
Yeah, I mean, like everybody's not a fighter, but when you get punched in the face, you figure out how to fight. I said, listen. So like bullying is happening on every sphere. So now the idea of somebody being cyberbullied is so foreign to me, right? But it's a very real reality. And I'm like, wow, but for us, we would be like, what do you mean? We could not digest that kind of mental weakness. But in relation to the world that they're growing up in, we have to understand the ebbs and flows of a changing society.
And the young people are experiencing cyberbullying to such a great extent that recently I started doing some research around the suicide rates. And the number 2 cause of death among kids between 10 and 18 is suicide. And the reason for that primarily is cyberbullying and a lot of other like sexual identity issues that they're starting to grapple with, and they just don't know. They don't know how to
navigate it. And we're, as I said, we have to become so much more intentional in parenting and providing different conversations than ever was, right? Like the streets kind of raised us up a little bit. We had more initiative. And I said, it's just not this generation. So to expect that from them is a little naive now on the part of an emerging parent. So as I'm thinking here, share with us what the name of the book is, where to find it. And then I want to give you the space to kind of wrap up where your journey and expertise in the marketplace is leading you, leading us, so that we can keep participating in some of your journey.
So the name of the book is Peace Be Still, Navigating My Son's Bipolar Disorder. I wanted it to be clear from the title what we're talking about here. Okay?
I like that.
And the book is available on Amazon. It's also available on my website, Jett Speaks. And you can go to the website. There's a tab for book at the top that will take you to the Jett Speaks, the book page, Peace Be Still. And you can purchase it either of those ways. I'm doing speaks and book talks around the country.
You recently just did a commencement speech.
So I did the commencement address at UConn Business School on Saturday.
Put some respect on her name.
And much to the surprise of the people who invited me to speak, because I attended UConn Business School.
Nice.
They didn't know about my mental health journey.
Sure.
And so when I wrote my speech talking to college graduates, how can I not, in the midst of Mental Health Awareness Month,
man.
how can I not talk about their mental and emotional well-being?
Excellent.
And so I did, and I found that there were students in tears. There were parents who came up to me afterwards and said, thank you so much for addressing that topic.
Sure.
Like, you don't know how impactful that was. And I just realized that mental illness knows no boundaries.
Zero.
It's not an African-American problem. It's not based on your socioeconomic level. It is impacting everybody globally.
Everyone.
And so the book is out there. I look forward to a lot more conversations about mental illness everywhere by everyone.
It's real.
It's predominant among younger adults, but it's still impacting people of all different ages.
Absolutely.
And so that's where you'll see me in half my time. The other part of my time, I spend doing things I love to do. So I got into acting. You can see me on Shine TV. I play Giselle in Moral Enemies. And I spend time in acting classes. And that's really like my self-care, my escape. I can be another character. I play a mob boss in Moral Enemies. And then I also am a real estate developer now. So I realized that working with a lot of my private equity and real estate fund clients, I was doing for them what I should be doing for myself.
And that's what we end up doing.
And so I now develop real estate, and I started a real estate syndication. And so through this syndication, I take on investors who want to grow their generational wealth through investing in real estate. And I am committed to turning at least 1,000 Black families into millionaires in a decade.
All right.
Because
I love it, because now we're throwing out numbers. I love this.
Absolutely. And I am a numbers person. And I show people based on the actual numbers and the returns you can expect from investing in real estate. Because for me, I focus on the racial wealth gap. And it's huge. And the racial wealth gap right now, the median gap between white families and Black families is $184,000. Imagine the capital gains you're getting every year by investing $184,000, and then you're rolling those capital gains into more investments. And we're never going to catch up. We're never going to catch up if we don't start doing something different.
There we go.
Real estate is that industry that produces more billionaires than any other industry. So that's where we're focused. That's where we're getting average. You don't have to be wealthy. Usually with most real estate funds, you have to be an accredited investor and make at least $200,000 a year. Those funds are not geared for us because the average Black family is not making $200,000 a year. So we're completely excluded from that opportunity. And so with my syndications, we have a $25,000 minimum to invest. For those folks, and there's still quite a few of us who can't make that. I'm starting a crowdfunding platform that's going to allow people to start investing at $1,000. Get your kids involved, your young adults involved. And one of the things I realize is that not only do we need to create generational wealth, we need to create generational investment knowledge. And so I teach my investors not only how much they're going to make, but how are we doing this?
How do
investments work? How are we able to turn a $50,000 investment into a $2.5 million bucket after a decade?
You my girl.
They see that.
We family. We officially family. You hit my heart. You hit my heart. Because, you know, my wife and I, and we're hitting so many things, but I just found that even being someone of perceived value as an athlete, I found that of all the circles that I've been in throughout my life, most people are just unwilling to share with you how to do what they've done. Right? And meaning, and I'm like, man, I'm actually pretty well educated. You know, I mean, we got a solid resume of success, but for all the people who you tell them what you're doing, all the people, oh man, great. But no one wants to actually tell you what things to avoid, how to do it. If you've been there, hey man, I'd love to have a conversation. How did you do it? They roll around the mountain. And as you talked about, previous generations are just concealing opportunities. And that's just never been us. And clearly it's not you. And I think that's how you begin to really break chains, break generations. And people, no one just wants to offer that hand up, right? And it's just
I'm like, there's plenty for everybody.
It really is. It really is. I said, listen, if you travel the world, you'll realize how wide open. We've been stuck in the cities. Ain't no elbow room. I said, just go out to the Midwest.
Oh yeah.
They ain't stressed out there.
Right.
It's space and it's room and it's opportunity for everyone. So I wanna thank you. And just give us, as we kind of wrapping up, what should we expect? You know, I love your last name is everything. So.
It's actually not even really mine. It's my ex-husband's last name.
It's yours now.
But I said the only thing I'm keeping from you is that name.
Come on
right?
now, listen.
It's mine.
That's mine now.
That's right.
So what can we expect, as the Jett keeps taking off, keeps gaining momentum? I love what you talked about, the self-care elements and how you just continue to grow and evolve and find ways to do things that you enjoy but also grow. You're well-rounded. But what can we continue to expect and what you feel like God's doing in your life?
What can we expect? I think we can continue to expect to hear more about the real estate fund.
Great.
Because I have a vision that eventually it's going to be the largest Black-owned real estate fund in the world. And we are going to buy that building and buy that building.
Come on. And we are in New York City. So you say buy that building, you might not be able to see.
Right?
Put some respect on.
But that's the vision. And so I'm going to keep on in this space with people just spreading the word about what we're doing. And the more investors we bring on, the more we're able to acquire and the more we're able to create generational wealth. And it's just going to keep going. And so expect to hear a lot more about that. One day you're going to say, oh my God, I remember she just started that on my podcast.
Listen, it's going down. Well, listen, it's so great to connect. You have so much value. You've added so much value to myself, our audience, and the best is yet to come. I'm about to line up my ducats. My wife, she's in the background. I'm taking some notes. So I want to thank you so much for your life, your journey, your transparency, because that's what transparency is, what leads to trust. And wherever we have trust, that's where we could actually lay that bridge for breakthrough. Exactly. So your life will continue to speak for many. So we want to thank our guest, Medina Jett. Listen, I hope there was too much. Y'all might have to pay for this. Might be exclusive. This might be exclusive. This might be a $1. No, but audience, make sure you lock into every area of this journey. This is you heard the pain points. This is real life stuff that we're all dealing with, and we need the understanding, the insight, and the wisdom so that we can continue to get great done. You can catch it next moment. We'll check in with you next week.